Welcome into Bucs Insider Live. Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith, and we are here to talk about everything Buccaneers leading up to this game against the Saints, what happened in this last week's game. So any questions you have for us, make sure you put those underneath our live video on the Facebook page. We'll try to get to some of those later in the show. For now, I figured we'd kind of start with some big takeaways from the game, even though that's not the most fun thing to do currently, but
well, we can actually start with a sort of roster move.
Okay, that's true. That's more positive and exciting.
Logan Ryan has been designated for return, the safety. Very versatile defensive back, very good at communicating. It's not nothing that through the first 3 games which he played, and he played 70% of the snaps, the Bucs defense was awesome, right? And they've been good for most of the year, but the first 3 games were the best stretch, and he was there, and then he got hurt 9 plays into the 4th game, and it's been a bit up and down. I'm not saying Logan Ryan is the absolute key to the defense, but the coaches do rave about how well he communicates, and that kind of keeps everybody on the same page.
Right.
So he's designated for return, which means he starts practicing. He'll be practicing today, and he can be activated at any time over the next 3 weeks and then play in the game. The last 2 guys that we brought back from injured reserve, Josh Wells and Gio Bernard, were then also added to the active roster later that same week. So it's a good trend.
Yeah, it's like what you talked about, where it's not like you want to push it, because if they miss the 21-day window, then that's it. And so typically if they're being activated, it's not like you think it is closer to the 21 days. Yeah. You're probably playing it a little bit safer and assuming it would be closer to that week. That would be a huge boost to that defense. And so tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the defense specifically this last week, of where, same thing, that there were some incredible stops and they were really holding their own, and then just maybe not being able to quite close it out. And how much is it about just how much they're on the field currently and what they're kind of being asked to do?
The coaches get asked that every week whenever there's a game like this, and we had a lot of punts in a row and a lot of 3 and outs, and is the defense getting tired at the end of the game? And they always reject that premise, that it's not a matter of them being tired. So if you go by what they say, that's not really the issue. And there isn't really a specific thing you could put your finger on to why a defense that really played 3.5 or more great quarters couldn't finish it at the end, and let a couple runs get around the outside. That was the main problem, I think. But they held them to 5 of 17 third downs. They had 4 sacks. Generally played pretty well. It's just they couldn't quite finish it. And honestly, it took an incredible, ridiculous one-handed catch on 4th down by the tight end in the back of the end zone to make it a losing effort. So I'm not too concerned about the defense. I don't think this inability to close games is something that should be chronic. I think overall you look at the defense and say they're looking pretty good. And really, in terms of the sacks in the season, they're on pace for almost 56, which would be a record. And the weird thing about it is, tell me who our sack leader is.
Ooh, Vita Vea?
That's right. Good job, Casey.
Yes.
6.5. I think Devin
is next. Yeah, I was going back and forth between the 2 of them.
There isn't a guy that's going to finish with 15 sacks. And generally when you have these great sack seasons, like that 55 season, Warren Sapp had 16.5, and then you also had, I'm blanking on his name, another end.
Simeon Rice?
No, it was before him.
I just always go with him
Jones.
when it's that.
I can't believe I can't think of his name right now, but there was another. It was a converted first-round pick, converted defensive tackle to defensive end, and he had like 12 sacks that year. So you don't have one guy, Marcus Jones. You don't have one guy piling up a ton of sacks. It's a team effort, but it's working.
Well, and it's interesting that your leading sack guys are the positions they are, much separate even from the idea of it being whether or not it's one guy. It's a nose tackle and then an inside linebacker.
Yeah, right.
It's just so interesting. And do you feel like that is more a credit to the guys that are leading it and to Todd Bowles' scheme, or is it potentially a problem that your outside guys, that especially without a Shaq Barrett and even before he went out, how do you kind of weigh that of how much do you need your outside linebackers to be getting more versus, wherever they're coming from, it doesn't matter?
Well, the bottom line is it doesn't matter. Wherever they're coming from is fine. But it also leaves some untapped potential there. So if these other positions are providing that impact, and if guys like Vita Vea and Akeem Hicks are either getting sacks and pressures or tying up a lot of blockers, you would like a little more production from your outside guys. But simply the loss of Shaq Barrett is a little hard to overcome in that regard.
Yeah. So another thing from the game that I think was a positive takeaway was Chris Godwin looks like Chris Godwin.
Exactly.
Tell me what you saw from him in his game and just what this could mean for this offense, that he has been back, quote unquote, most of the year. He missed again that little bit of the hamstring. But this feels like there's the difference in him playing versus being the Chris Godwin that we've always known. And so what does that mean for this offense?
Well, the first number I'd throw at you is 66, which is the number of snaps he had out of a possible 69. So they're obviously not concerned about his playing time. Yeah, and so he's on the field all the time, and that's because he's back to being that guy that does everything in your offense. He's one of the best run blocking receivers in the league. I mean, I'm not saying he's out on the edge blocking a cornerback in case the run breaks out to the second level. I'm saying he's actively involved, often lined up tight, blocking in the blocking schemes, and that's been a big part of our offense the last couple of years. He's the guy who gets the yak. I don't think the tunnel screens are working quite as much as well as they used to, because I think teams are aware of them now, but he's just getting a high volume, and in that game he had 12 catches on 13 targets, so everything's working. And his average depth of target was 10.4 yards, which is his highest of the year. So we're not talking a bunch of little dink and dunk screens. He's getting downfield, and he ended up with 12 catches. And the interesting thing is there have only been 6 games in our entire history where a wide receiver has caught 12 or more passes in a game, and Chris has half of them.
It's incredible.
Yeah,
his volume of catches is always so impressive that even when the team knows he's someone that they're going to go to a lot, for him to still be able to get open that many times is remarkable. No matter, even if it's a short pass, it's still incredible how many times you find him open and available. We had a question here from Christopher asking, is Jensen coming back anytime soon? And I thought that we could answer that along with just overall offensive line health at this point, and who you would predict as being the starting 5 this Sunday, and then just what it could look like the rest of the year potentially.
Yeah, the Jensen question, I mean, obviously people are going to ask that, but it's been asked virtually every week, and there's never been a different answer. So I don't understand, I don't understand, it's not the right way to put it. I don't really get the need to constantly be talking about this until there's some sort of report that Ryan Jensen is running, Ryan Jensen is working with trainers. We haven't seen anything like that. So if the latest rumors are he's close to returning, I don't know where they're coming from. And I said this a month ago when people started saying, oh, it looks like we're hearing that Ryan Jensen could be back any day now. I'm like, I need to see something first.
Yeah, what would make you think
it would be awesome, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I need to see something before I really start jumping on that bandwagon. But, you know, now we're without Tristan Wirfs. So basically you have Donovan Smith is all that's left standing from last year's offensive line. And that's not to throw any shade on guys like Robert Hainsey or Nick Leverett. I think those guys have done well.
Right.
But when you're replacing 80% of your line, it's probably going to be hard for you to duplicate what was an impressive performance by that group last year. It was one of the best parts of the team last year, and obviously they sent 3 guys to the Pro Bowl. Tristan Wirfs was in the first team All-Pro. It's a tough loss, although I have to say, of all the news that's come out this week, the fact that it's a high ankle sprain and he could be back this year, probably will be back this year, felt like really good news.
Huge news. I mean, I think that when they're not showing the replay because they're talking about how gruesome it is, you kind of expect the worst. I mean, you're thinking compound fracture, you're thinking, I mean, who knows what, and when they don't show that, you're just assuming that it's out the rest of the year, and it's almost like you're even just hoping he'll be okay.
Well, that, and if you get an injury like a torn ACL or something like that, this time of the year, like Chris Godwin did, you're worried about the start of next year. Now we don't, that concern is off the table, and you're just hoping he can make an impact before this season is over.
Right. I loved Tristan's tweet about it as well, talking about how, hey kids, make sure you drink your milk. That that nothing broke. That That's great. I thought that was pretty great.
He probably does drink milk.
I think he probably, based on what he's talked about, all of his eating habits and everything, I think everything is on the table at this point. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this upcoming Saints game. What are the biggest things that you feel like this team is looking for, and maybe that they learned from the first matchup? I always think it's interesting, these divisional ones, of how much is similar, how much is different between the two teams since that first matchup.
I don't really know, honestly, if there's a whole lot you can take away from that first game, because it was 3-3 into the fourth quarter, and then we got 5 takeaways. Right?
So do that again.
Yeah,
what you're saying.
That would be the lesson.
That's
what I'm
hearing.
Get 5 turnovers again, which, by the way, is almost half of the turnovers we've gotten all year. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think the issue with the Saints over the last 4 years, I guess, is that they just seem to match up really well with what we try to do on offense. And that's true even when we've been, I mean, our offense isn't humming really right now, but even when it was in late in 2020, in 2021, lost to them 9-0, lost to them 38-3. They match up well, right? But if you want to get more specific, I think that probably the biggest challenges on both sides of the ball, first for our offense is they have they're like us. They have a lot of sacks, but they don't have one guy with a ton of them.
Right.
Demario Davis has 6.5. They're great in. Cameron Jordan only has 5.5, but they have a lot of sacks. They're 7th in the league in sacks per pass play. Bucs are 1st in the league in sacks per pass play allowed, so there's your big strength-on-strength matchup. But when it comes to the Bucs defense, and several guys, coaches and players were talking about this yesterday, the challenge with the Saints is there's so much to prepare for because they do so many different things with their personnel. A lot of that has to do with Taysom Hill. They can make a lot of different combinations with him in different spots. But look at this. They have used 382 different 11-man lineup combinations this year. It's by far the most in the league. Look how far. I mean, that's way more than the second team than it is from the second to the fifth.
Yeah.
There's six there because 3 of them.
How interesting.
And again, a lot of it has to do with Taysom Hill, and some of that has to do with injuries because if you had your starting center 6 games and then he's replaced by somebody else, then you're going to have new lineup combinations. But every team deals with that, so you can call that an equal wash. And still say the Saints do so many different things. And Devin White, for instance, was saying the walkthrough yesterday was very helpful, and it was kind of a bonus walkthrough because it's a Monday game, so today's Thursday, but it's really Wednesday, and yesterday was a bonus day. They were able to walk through a lot of the fits against the many different personnel packages that they're going to see. So it's kind of a big day, a big week for the scout team.
Yeah,
they have to do a lot.
They got to do a lot of different things. Who do you feel like is our Taysom Hill on our practice squad? That's an interesting
I don't have
strategy there. That's going to be interesting.
He's so big. That's the thing about him is he's a good runner, but he's so big that he's hard to get down in the open field. I don't know if we have a guy like that on our practice squad.
That's interesting to see. So for you, what do you feel like is going to be the one thing that will be the biggest indicator of whether or not the Bucs come away with a win?
Well, I mean, we just talked about it. If they can get some turnovers, that would be big. From all the stats, it looks like a low-scoring game. They haven't been scoring a lot. They just got shut out by San Fran, although San Fran has a great defense. But I think they beat the Rams, but otherwise they've had low point totals recently. They have some injuries on offense. Andy Dalton's been okay. So in what could be basically a lot like this Cleveland game, right? It was a low-scoring game the whole way. There was some fireworks early on, and then it was a lot of defense. So I guess you can't really count on turnovers, so I won't say that. I would just say getting manageable third downs so that you can, like in the Seattle game in Munich, you can convert more of those third downs because the biggest difference between the offensive efforts between Seattle and Cleveland was third downs. They just couldn't stay on the field. And people say, why isn't Cade Otton getting the ball? Why aren't you going to the run more often? Well, if you can't stay on the field, you can't get to a lot of these things. No one's going to get enough targets, reps, everything, because there just aren't very many to go around. All right, well, that is going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider Live. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll be back here next week.